So now that we're in the GTO interface here, when you first open GTO Plus, this is what you actually see. And if you made your way through the PioSolver videos, your first thought might be wow, GTO Plus doesn't have nearly the amount of functionality that PioSolver does. And while PioSolver is extremely feature dense and GTO Plus doesn't have as much functionality as PioSolver, it would be a mistake to think that GTO Plus is much less sophisticated, because it's certainly not, and there's a lot of things that you can do within the tool. GTO Plus actually, in my opinion, is organized a little bit better and doesn't overload you with a lot of features right away. So the features are only available for you when you actually get to those individual screens. So as you'll see when we dive into some of the rest of this video and the upcoming videos, there's a lot within GTO Plus that we can actually explore. GTO Plus, one of the first things that we can actually do when we're actually building a game tree, we have to enter ranges. So to do so, we will enter ranges by clicking either the out of position player or the in position player here. I can click on either one, even though this note here says enter range for player 1. I'm gonna actually click on this player. I can click on player 2 and enter a range, but I'll start with player 1. And whatever player I actually clicked is gonna be denoted here by this blue line underneath. So if I have this bottom one, it'll actually be a green line. If I click on the top one, it'll be this blue line, but it'll be highlighted to show me which range that I've actually selected. And you'll see this grid. It's the same 13 by 13 grid, organized by the pocket pairs going all the way down. Below the diagonal of pocket pairs, there's offsuit hands. Above the diagonal of pocket pairs, there's suited hands. GTO Plus actually organizes this and color codes it based off of these three individual hand classes. Pocket pairs are colored green, so you can actually see when I work my way all the way down. Pocket pairs are colored green. The suited hands above are colored in blue, and I'll highlight this and work my way and highlight all of these. And then the offsuit hands below are highlighted in red. Now you're already starting to see some of the functionality here. I can add hands to a range by clicking on them individually. I can also click one, hold my mouse down, and drag them through. You'll see that as I'm adding hands, I can actually, even if I put my mouse, I'm still holding the mouse down. If I go over other hands that are already selected, it's not going to deselect them, but it's going to continually add hands as long as I hover over hands that are not selected. If I want to remove hands from this grid, same thing. I can either click through hands individually, or I can click and hold down and drag all the way through. So an easy way of populating or depopulating hands within an overall range. I have this clear button, so I'll click clear and clear all of this out. And I can use this slider functionality, and as I click and add individual hands into the range, it's going to add hands one at a time based on a set of rankings. Up here in the top right here, we have this no limit rankings. GTO Plus has 5 different rankings out of the box, and I can select any one of these, and that'll filter the functionality through so that as I continually click and drag this slider here, it's going to add hands in the order that is noted here within this selected ranking. So the no limit ranking might be different than the poker stove ranking, which is different than, these two Skalansky led rankings, which is different than the heads up all inequity rankings. But this is just a way. I don't necessarily use these as gospel. I might use this as a starting point and say, well, give me about a 20% range, and I'll adjust from there, saying that, well, maybe if I want a 20% range, I'd rather have all of the suited aces and then take out some of these kind of offsuit Broadway combos and work my way to a 20% range that way. And you can actually even see noted here in the bottom right, based on whatever I actually pick, it's going to show you the number of combinations that I've actually selected and what overall percentage of that range is. Finally, I can actually even use this slider to cut out a portion of the range. So there's two options here. The blue option is selected first, but I can actually remove a top end of this range. So maybe I want to look at a 3-bet defense range versus a 3-bet, and I can cut out the top 6% of the range and maybe say that I might 4-bet this top 6% of the range or top 5% of the range or whatever the case may be. And this in-between portion here would be the range that's actually showing on this screen, which would be actually my defense range in that spot. If I want to choose individual suits, I can do so. So perhaps maybe I want to say, well, ace-5 and ace-4 suited, I only want to include the hearts and clubs combos of those. I would click on suit selection, and then you'll see this grid here, and I can choose whatever individual combination of hands that I want. So I've chosen to pick the hearts and the clubs. Once I choose those two options here, I will go back up to the grid and say, well, ace-5 and ace-4 suited. I'll click on those two, and you can see based on this little triangle up here in the top right which hands that I've actually selected. And once I'm comfortable with that, I just click apply current selection. And you'll actually see once I actually do that is now, instead of the boxes being completely filled, only half of the box is actually filled here. If I hover over, you can see which ones here in this section right here are actually filled. And it's showing that just the hearts and the clubs options are filled within that area. But if you know that there are 4 individual ways in which we can make a hand from a suited perspective, I actually could also have diamonds or spades. But because have noted that we're only including the hearts and clubs options here, we are not including diamonds and spades. So that's why only half of the boxes are actually being filled. Now I'm using display method 2, which shows only half of the boxes being filled. I could choose display method 1, but the way in which it shows that only half of these combos are selected is by shading this from a gradient standpoint. I don't think that necessarily, is as precise of a way of looking at it. It's hard for me to tell that this is 50% here. Whereas if I choose display method 2, it's easier for me to see that this is half of the combos. This normalize button here, I don't necessarily use it that much, but it's there as a way to normalize individual hands within this individual range. Right now, it's not going to actually do anything because there's no hands to normalize in this view here, but this lets me look at this range a little bit differently. Again, I don't necessarily choose this normalize option often at all. GTO Plus also does a nice job of individual options. It does have instructions for individual things. So they do a really good job within the user interface of just giving instructions of how to use different functionality within the tool. If I want to actually color code a range, I can do so by applying groups to a selection. So when I select this, you see everything goes back to blue again. And by default, it's going to be blue, which is group 1, but I can actually color code this and look at and choose different portions of the range to color code differently. So maybe I want to make these offsuit broadways group 2, and group 3 might be the pocket pairs, and so on and so forth. But it's a way for me to actually organize this range. Another thing here, so you see this instructions right here for GTO Plus. They also sometimes have this actual link, which will, if I click on this, it'll take me to the GTO Plus website where they have some more detail on how to actually create grouped ranges and what just the various functionality of how I might change the color coding, different weightings, names of the groups, things of that nature here too. So GTO Plus does do a really good job of packing in a lot of information and also making sure that you have an understanding of how to actually use the various functionality within the tool itself and making it easy to find answers like that. Now, if I get to a point where, let's say I want to store this range, that's where this right side of the screen will come into play. I can add this range, and if I click add range, and it's going to bring up this option here to enter a name, and maybe I want to call this a test range, and I'll hit accept. And this will store this range for me to actually use later. I also have other ranges that I've stored here within GTO Plus. So suppose we actually want to build out a game tree for a specific scenario to solve. And I want to start with a set of ranges that I already have within GTO Plus. Well, I can actually do so by using any ranges that I've saved in here previously. In this case here, I've been spending a lot of time recently digging into 200 big blind game trees. So let's build out a game tree for a 200 big blind example. So I have some ranges here that are pre-solved equilibrium ranges. This is my set of 200 big blind, 9 max equilibrium scenarios. And I want to look at a hijack versus big blind scenario. So hijack opens, big blind defends. Since we're looking at the out of position player, I will open my big blind folder, and you see GTO Plus does a nice job of nesting everything, so I've organized this into folders. But now that I have all these big blind ranges, I'll hover down to the hijack open big blind call portion, and you'll see that as I'm hovering over, the grid is changing to show what that range looks like. So it actually does a nice job of actually showing me what options I can select before I actually select it. And when I get to the range that I'm comfortable with, and this is the range that I actually want, I would just double click this. And now you'll see that this range is populated as the big blind defense range. And I can hover over things and I can see the individual weightings of each of these hands in range. So you can see here at this right side of the screen, as I'm hovering over, it's showing me how much of that individual hand is in the overall equilibrium range. So King 8 suited, King 7 suited, King 6 suited, 100% frequency in range, whereas Ace 9 suited, only 46.4% of the time it's in range. Ace Jack suited, only 66.2% of the time is in range. Ace Queen suited, only 25.2% of the time is in range. So some other times the big blind is 3-betting those hands because we're presuming that the big blind is never actually folding those particular hands to a hijack open. But other times, in this case here, the Ace Queen suited, 25.2% of the time, it's actually putting that in the call range. So when I'm comfortable with the range that I've actually selected, I can click Done, and it will save the range into the option here for the out of position player. Well, now I'm going to enter the option for the in position player, and I'll do the same thing here by clicking in position. And I'll do this a little bit more quickly. I can go and enter my range this way, and I said here I want to look at a hijack opening range. I would hover over hijack open to 3 big blinds and double click on it, and that range will populate here. The last thing I actually didn't show you is we have this text box here. You can enter this hands into the text box, and you can kind of see some of the notation in here too. It's pretty similar to the notation that you might see in other solvers like PioSolver. I can enter individual hands. I can enter ranges of hands. So if I want to actually use like aces through deuces to show all pocket pairs, I could do it that way. But there are different ways in which I can actually note out what hands I want in this individual range. And when I'm comfortable with that, I would hit enter, and that range would populate right here too. This actually is really good. It accepts a lot of inputs here. So if I actually have a range from PioSolver, I can copy that range in the text from that range and paste it right here, and it would populate nicely here in this grid. So again, I have my hijack opening range, and I want to click done, and I can actually click done, and it's going to populate those two ranges. So now you can see that I have my in position range, the hijack opening range that's populated. I can see that at a small level right here, but the shape does look pretty distinct, so I can see the shape of this range. And then here is my big blind defense range against the hijack open. So now it's actually time for me to build a board. I can enter cards randomly in here, so I can enter cards like this, and I can enter a flop, I can enter up to a turn, I can enter a river as well too. So I can start at any one of those individual streets, or I can just pick a random board. So really easy ways for me to enter what board that I actually want to start with here. I'm going to choose a board myself. So I'm going to choose Jack of Hearts, 9 of Spades, and 6 of Hearts board. That looks like a pretty good board to study. And when I'm comfortable with my board, I can click Done. And I've entered my rangers, I've entered my board. Now it's time for me to build a decision tree. So I can click Build Tree. Now you can start seeing a lot more options for me to fill out. As we've covered in Module 1, we have, as inputs, entered ranges. We've entered a board. The next thing for us to do is enter the stacks, or really the stack to pot ratio. I have some options here in entering my stack to pot ratio. Obviously, I have to enter my starting pot and my effective stacks. I do also have the options of entering rake and a cap here. I usually tend to look at zero rake games. A lot of the games in which I'm playing in, rake tends to be a negligible factor. If you're playing a time game, obviously there is no rake in that case there on an individual hand level. But if you're playing a 1-3 game, 2-5 game, rake can be a decent portion of the pot, which will impact things at the fringes. You may want to include rake here as just an additional factor in your models here. And you can do so. The way you would do this here is in most games here, they might take 10% of the pot up to a certain cap. You would just enter the 10 for the 10% up here, up to whatever cap they take. So maybe they take it up to $6 here or whatever. If it's in big blinds, you may say 10% of the pot up to 2 big blinds or whatever the case may be. But I'm going to remove this, and as you can see, you have to actually have something here. So I'm just going to have 0 for both of those here because we're not going to solve anything with rake here. Now, starting pot, you can use decimals in here. So that's one distinction between GTO Plus and PioSolver. PioSolver, you had to convert everything into non-decimals. GTO Plus, you can start with decimals here. In our case here, I'm going to put in a starting pot of 6.5. I like to do things in big blinds. But as I've mentioned in Module 1, the specific unit doesn't matter. So it could be in dollars, it could be in big blinds, it could be in tournament chips. That doesn't matter. What matters here is that your units are consistent. I just like to use it in big blinds because I think that's easier to think of the hand in the way of big blinds. But again, if you want to, you choose whatever is the most comfortable unit for you to actually look at, as long as you're just not going to be confused later on, because the rest of the game tree is going to be within these specific units. So in our case here, we're going to say that our in position player opened to 3 big blinds, our small blind, everyone else folded, including our small blind, so that's where the 0.5 comes into play. The big blind calls, and we have a starting pot of 6.5 big blinds. We started with effective stacks of 200 big blinds, so you do have to remove the 3 raise. Your effective stacks are the effective stacks at the start of the street you plan to study. An important thing to note here. So our effective stacks here are 197 big blinds. And once we get to a point right here, we've actually entered this in, we can feel comfortable with our stack sizes here. If we wanted to do this for a sit and go and use some type of ICM factors in play, we can do this here as well. So in this case here, we would enter those individual stack sizes, and we can enter stack sizes for the rest of the table. It could be a sit and go, it could be a final table of an event, but GTO Plus is only going to factor in up to 1 table worth of players. So in this case here, 10 individual players for GTO Plus. You can add the prizes that are in here, as well as kind of really what the starting pot is in terms of the same units that you would use for stacks. We're going to look at this from a cash game perspective though, so I'll go back to cash game over here too. The next thing I would do is actually build out the decision tree, and this is really the last of the inputs that we're going to do in order to actually solve a game tree. There are 4 different tabs here, and I'm going to really go through 3 of them fairly quickly. I do have this help option here, so I'm going to click on help, and it's going to take me to the screen on GTO Plus, and GTO Plus is going to give me some detailed options as to how I might want to build out game trees. And it's really mostly for the advanced tab on the tree builder, which I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail here. So I'll come back to this help and the options that are available for us in the help menu here on the advanced functionality in a second. The basic tab, this just lets me build a game tree from a geometric standpoint. So GTO Plus is smart in the sense that it's treating this as a number of bets within the game tree. If we don't want to necessarily customize the game tree and we want to just say, well, how many bets do we think it would take to get all of the money in the pot? GTO Plus will actually build a game tree out that is based on that number of bets that we've noted here, up to 5 bets. So in this case here, you can see that we've actually selected this 5th bet option here, and GTO Plus will guess what we actually want first based on what we've selected here from a starting pot and effective stack standpoint. So we've selected 5 bets, and in order to get all of the money in at 5 bets, GTO Plus has somewhat kept it consistent. So you can see here, each bet is approximately 60 to 65% of the pot. If I click here now that we want to do this in 4 bets, you can see now that the 4th bet will be the all-in bet, and now they're all roughly about 90% of the pot. If we want to look at this in 3 bets, now it's 100. Each bet is about 150% of the pot, and so on and so forth, right? If we did it at 2 bets, it's about 330% of the pot. So we can actually build a tree out like this by clicking any one of these options here, and then click Build Tree. And I'll just do this here for demonstration purposes. If I click Build Tree, you'll see this option that shows up that says the tree has been successfully built, and GTO Plus will then build this tree out. You can see the tree gets built up here, and it will use this option here. So the first bet in any scenario here will be 4. So the out of position player could bet 4, but if I check, the in position player could bet 4, and so on and so forth. And you kind of see the screen. This is kind of cheating us ahead to the next video, which we're not necessarily going to go through in detail. The second bet is up to 13.5, again, and so on and so forth. We're not really going to go through the output here until one of the next upcoming videos here. Rebuild lets us rebuild a tree with the current setting. So if we have this tree built and we want to necessarily rebuild the tree, we can click this button here and it would rebuild the tree based on whatever settings that we've actually selected already here. And then we have this LHE tab, which stands for Limit Hold'em, and it lets us denote here the specific flop bet size and turn bet size, and then the cap notes how many bets can actually go on any individual street. So this lets us solve, if you want to actually solve a limit hold'em game, you can do so here as well too. But I don't want to do any of that. I actually want to build a no limit hold'em game, and I specifically want to build a very advanced tree for the no limit hold'em game.